everyone. Our next speaker is Ted Ellenbecker. Ted holds over 40 line class world records. He's listed in the top 5 freshwater anglers with the IGS in 2001. He also built the Theory of Three, which is a big part of today's seminar. Please give a round of applause for our next speaker. This is Ted Ellenbecker, everybody.
Thank you. Yeah, everybody can hear me okay? All right. This seminar is going to be a little different than anything you've heard today and probably ever. Be a little patient with me, okay? This is about structure. I know everybody out here is probably going, everybody talks about structure. Well, they do, but not like this. I'll guarantee it. This is about you. This is about locating any fish on any water. And I know that is a big claim. I get that. But this works. You introduced me stating I have some world records. I do. This information you're going to get tonight is responsible for those records for locating the fish. We're talking catfish today. This information will work for any species you want to apply it to. You're going to have to do me a favor though. I don't know your body of water. So going through this, if I say log jams, you don't have log jams, replace it with something you do have. If I say riprap, you don't have riprap, replace it with what you have, okay? You can adapt this to work your water. That's all there is to it. Not a problem. I'm going to ask you a couple questions here to start with, just to get us on the same page. I'm sure if you fish like I do, you've been out on the water, it's been a bad day, the fish just aren't biting, right? Okay? No matter what you do. You get done, you come back to the shore, or you get back to the boat, you talk to your buddy, your wife, or your dog, and you go, what if? What if I had? What if I did? What if I went? I used to do that. I don't anymore. That makes me sound like I made a mistake. When you're done with this today, if you apply any of this, you'll never have to say that again, because you will know you did it right. Okay? We're going to go against the grain here a little bit today. The next question I'm going to ask, your statement, when you're out in the water, say in the boat or on the shore, and you were sitting with your buddy, and you made plans, and you're at your spot, your hot spot, you thought you were going to knock them dead. Things aren't going right. You ever look at your buddy and you go, well, what now? What do we do? Okay? You won't have to do that again because you will know what to do. This is a strategy. Keith Sutton, a friend of mine, coined it a strategy. We've kept it that way. Okay? You will know. The next one, when you're getting ready to go fishing, if you're like me, I spend a half hour, an hour getting my tackle box ready. Kind of fun, right? But how much time do you spend getting you ready? You're the foundation for your success. The tackle box is a tool. But most people spend no time on themselves. And that's the biggest mistake you can make. We'll prove it to you today. Foundation of success. It is you, and it's often forgotten. Let me explain something. I'm going to give you an example of something that happened to me 2 years ago up to Lake Vermilion on vacation. That's a prime example of this. Now, don't get me wrong. I like my toys. I like electronics. I like my fishing rods. I like my fishing reels. Ask my wife. She'll tell you. I do. Too much. We were up at Vermilion. I'd never been there before. So I hired a guide for 6 hours to take me out. It's a big lake, 40 miles by 40 miles. There's 300 islands on it. Thought, okay, 6 hours. I'm here for 10 days. This guy can show me around, right? So we went out, and he had all the fancy equipment. You know, the Garmin locator out front, all that. First structure we went to, we spotted a big fish. Muskie or northern, I don't know. Big fish. We could cast to him. We could watch the lure drop. Very impressive. Bring it back past him. We could see the fish turn, follow the whole bit. But here's where the equipment gets in the way. You need to make the decisions. After that, we started going to different structures. He was scanning weed beds, he was scanning rock points, he was scanning bay mouths, he was scanning everything. Never spotted another big fish. This is where you come back into it, or he should have. We never went back to the initial structure, the type. The first structure was 2 small islands with a south wind pouring through the space, about 50 yards of space, creating a huge current coming between those islands. These fish were waiting on the outside. Okay? The lake has 300 islands on it. This guide was so impressed with his equipment that he never even considered going back to that type of a structure. Okay? Big mistake. You hook your boat up, you tie your boat up to the dock, start the motor, and you say, boat, go find me some fish. What's it going to do? It sits there. Turn on the depth finder, go find me a big cat. Depth finder can't do it. None of the toys, I'll rephrase it, none of the equipment can do anything without you making the decision, without you pointing the transducer at the fish. All it does is show you what you found, okay? And I know I'm stressing this a lot, but it goes back to you guys. You have to make the decisions, and the better decision is made with better information, okay? And a lot of information that fishermen have been told in the past, quite frankly, is inaccurate. And that has incomplete at best, but I'll say it's inaccurate. And that has to do with structure. Okay. Sorry. There you go. This is not a trick question. Okay? Not a trick question. On this side, this fell out of a tree in my backyard. Picked it up, okay, when I was mowing the yard. Anybody know what that is? Well, a stick. Thank you, yes, it is a stick. Yeah. This was in a rock garden in my backyard. Rock? This guy, if I had hats to throw out, man, I'd be launching them at you. Okay. So, according to the definitions of structure that are being used right now, which are 2 of them, in the 1950s there was a freshwater angler that said, if it's connected to the bottom, it's structure. 10 years later, a smart saltwater angler said, if it's a change in the bottom, it's structure. Okay, well, according to that, then this would be structure if it was in your water laying on the bottom, and this would be a structure. Well, there's a problem with that. Number one, that information has no potential to help you, okay, because it doesn't make any sense. And the information to make decision with needs to make sense. Okay, let me explain what these are, and then we'll take a look at structure. If you go by definition in the dictionary, okay, a structure is a relationship or combination of elements or parts to make something complex. Okay? So what's a structure? These aren't structure. This is what they say it is, but it isn't. Okay, so what's a structure? Some facts about a structure for our purpose is we want something that will concentrate and hold fish. Okay? Not just a random fish. It takes a lot of time and money to go fishing. It does. Okay? It's not cheap. I want to make the most of it when I'm out there, and I want to find what I'm looking for. If I'm looking for big flathead, I want to find that fish. A blue, I want to find it. A channel, I want to find it. A muskie, I want to find him. Okay? So, the structure that will hold fish, concentrate and hold fish, is going to be made up of 3 elements on your body of water. And 3 is a magical number. Okay, it's kind of like a unicorn. I don't know why, but it's there. Okay, 3 is a biggie. It seems as though 2 elements is not enough to really concentrate fish, over the period of a year. 4 becomes a problem. For some reason, our brain can't handle it, and it has a tendency to spread fish out again. We don't want to do that. You want to find an area where the fish are located, they're concentrated, and they stay this weekend, next weekend, and the weekend after, and next month, and maybe next spring, okay? And the reason that works is because each element involved has a different purpose. So you have a hump, a weed bed, and rocks. Well, the rocks at a certain time of year, they house snails, they house leeches, they house crawdads. The weeds are spawning areas for the minnows, the crawdads, and leeches. The hump can provide different depths, water temperatures, light conditions, and other things, okay? The fish don't have to move. It's just common sense on steroids. There's 4 types of elements in a body of water. And I know this stuff doesn't sound important, but when you go out next time, if you remember any of this, you will look at your body of water differently. That's all there is to it. You will. And this helps us. Why? Because fish have 2 bad habits that are the death of them, in some cases literally. They have, by species, preferences of forage. They also have preferences of the elements they want to utilize. This is how we get to the any fish, any water. You need to understand your fish, your species. What elements in that body of water will that species utilize? Okay? Sometimes you have walleyes on the shoals. You have flatheads and log jams. What if you don't have a log jam? Maybe they're in the low-head dams. Maybe you don't have low-head dams. They're on the riprap. Maybe you need to know that. Okay? And then not just that, but to really pin it down, you need to find 3 elements in that water those fish are looking for. Okay? If you combine them, chances are it's going to hold fish. Not only fish, but in my experience, bigger fish. Kind of like buck deer. They've got the best place in the world pinned down. There's a reason for it. Big fish kick the little fish out of where they want to live. I've had more PBs come out of this by using this information than I can honestly count. Okay. There's 4 types of elements. Some you need to know and use, some you don't. The first type of element is called an inherent element. And I doubt any of you have ever heard this before. I don't know why, but no one's ever done it. An inherent element, every body of water has the inherent elements. Quite simply, it's the water, it's the terra firma, the bottom, the shore, and it's the air. Now these 3 elements, even though they're the largest elements that make up the body of water, are frankly useless to you unless they have connection to another element. Let me explain this real quick. If this stage was covered in water this deep, and this was your body of water, and there was nothing else here, there would be nothing on this body of water to position fish. It's all the same. In the air, if it's a stable 70 degrees forever and ever and ever, there's no wind, there's no clouds, there's no time of day, the air will not position fish unless you add wind or barometers or other elements. Getting the picture here a little bit, the more you put together, the better. The shoreline, same thing. Bottoms, if it's a flat bottom, it will not position fish. You put a point in there, you put an old riverbed in there, you put a hump in there, pile of rocks, now the fish will position on something, okay? So the inherent elements, they're there. I have to include them because that's what makes your lake, but you don't need to worry about it, okay? Excuse me, the elements gain power, and this is important. You want a structure that is a high-powered structure, obviously, okay? There's elements that don't have any power at all. Go back to the little stick we had to explain this. If I laid that little stick in a bay or on the bank or in the bottom of a river, how many fish are going to connect to that stick? Not maybe you have a minnow swim by and hang out for a minute. But if I drop a 30-foot cottonwood, that's another wood element. across that river, now that is a wood element that has power. That's how to explain it literally, okay? If I have a 2-mile-an-hour breeze for a week on a lake, is that going to push the plankton to the side of the lake to bring the bait fish, to bring the predators? Probably not. You make it a 10-mile-an-hour wind, after 3 days, you have fish stacked on one shore. That's the power. They make power in 3 ways, actually. Number 1 is size and mass. The bigger the element, the stronger the element, the more power it has. Number 2, its relationship to another high-powered element. It's just like multiplying the attractiveness to the fish. The third thing you have to remember a little bit is that age can affect some elements. We'll just say a log jam. Back in the day of catfish fever, Stangy and Smith would talk about old wood, like in the Sioux River. And the reason they talked about that is because when that log jam forms, and it's been there for, we'll say, a couple of years, the water has created undercuts. The freshwater shrimp have attached themselves. You may have some moss going. You may have a canopy that's collected over the top. Whereas you drop a fresh log jam in there, none of that has evolved. Okay? So, got a new tree, you got an old tree, look at the old tree. Old pile of rocks compared to a new pile of rocks, you want the old pile of rocks. Big old wood out trumps little wood. Okay. And number 2, cluster elements. Cluster elements have a lot of power. Cluster element can be standing trees in the bay. It can be a line of wing dams. It can be a line of a mile-long set of riprap. It can be a set of humps in a lake, like down Santa Cooper, where the mile marker 18 is a really good spot if you're interested. You have to remember, though, that because this cluster element or others are spread out over a long period or a long position, the fish are going to be scattered. Yeah, that's going to attract fish. But do you want to spend 6 hours trying to fish that and find half a dozen fish? Maybe. No. But if you connect a second element to this element, where there's a drop-off, a weed bed connecting, an old road bed, a channel, anything, now the fish come into here, but they will gravitate to where that other element is connected. Just like you go to the restaurant that offers food and drink. Food by itself, not so good. So that's a cluster element. And number 3. Number 3 is a common element. They're all over the place. They can be anything. Some bodies of water have docks. Some don't. Some bodies of water have riprap. Some don't. This is what you're looking at. This is just the common element, okay? Any body of water can have anything. Wind is also considered an element. Light is considered an element, okay? Like the weather elements. And I'll say something about weather right now. When you're looking at weather, it's important, but you want to look at weather from 3 days ago. If you've had a south wind 3 or 4 days ago, and it stayed that way for 2 days, even if today the wind's out of the west, but for 2 days, 3 days, you've had a south wind, you fish the south wind, because that west wind does not have an effect for 2 to 3 days. The fish will not have moved yet. So that's something that a lot of people don't talk about, and they should, frankly, because it's very important. And what wind is a prime factor. It's one of the most positioning elements there is. Wind will position fish, current positions fish, temperature can position fish, lots of little things, okay? One thing you don't want to do is get tied into one thought pattern. I'm going to give you an example. I hate doing it, but I'm going to. It's a friend of mine. He's a good friend of mine, and he would give me the shirt off his back. But I can't fish with the guy. I can't. I'll give you an example. We were at a tournament. We were pre-fishing. and it was windy out, and we found the stock dam in the back of a bay. It's a man-made reservoir, okay? So there's a flooded stock dam. There's no creek channel coming in. So we just stopped in there because it's too windy out in the main lake anyway. Stopped in there, in 40 minutes we had 4 fish. You know, like, okay, so we're looking at each other going, we need to get out of here. We don't want people to see this because this is working good. They weren't huge fish, but, 5 to 25, right? 4 in 40 minutes, that's doing a tournament tomorrow. That's okay. The next day, we get in the boat, and this gentleman, which I knew was going to happen, said, well, I know they're going to be out in deep water today. Okay. I'm in your boat. I'm your guest. We're going to deep water. 40-mile-an-hour winds. We're dragging an 8-foot custom drift sock and a 30-pound anchor, and we can't keep it under 2.5 miles an hour. I can't even get my bait to the bottom. This guy won't go back to the stock dam. It's in deep water. We're in deep water. Well, maybe, but I can't slow my bait down enough for them to do it, to get it. I can't even get my bait on the bottom most of the time. And the wind's trying to throw us out of the boat. But he still wouldn't go back to the stock dam. So don't get stuck, okay? When you have elements piled up, you need to fish each element. This is another mistake people make, and I don't really understand it. I'll give you, each element represents 33.3% of your opportunity to catch a fish. Each element. Until you know the element the fish are on. Once you know the element the fish are on, they're on the wood, fine. Fish wood. Find other structures that contain wood. They're on the drop, then fine. Find other structures that have a drop, okay? But until you know that, if you don't check each element with the presentation, you're losing your percentages, okay? If you fish, and a lot of guys, I'm going to fish wood. They go in, they position up in front of the log jam, put the baits out, no bites in a half hour, and they leave. But they didn't fish the river channels. They didn't put a bait in front of the undercut on the bank. Okay? They're already there. They stopped in that position because they thought the fish would be there. And yet, they fished 30% of it, and they left. Doesn't make sense. You're already there. And for catfishermen, making 2 more presentations is nothing. It's casting from here to here, and from here to here, giving it 20 minutes a shot. Now, if you don't find a fish, you want to go find another structure, fine, go ahead, makes sense, right? It really does. But they drive away from it, so they spend a half an hour driving around trying to find another structure. Could have had your bait in the water and maybe found the fish. This happened to us up in Caliper Lake in Manitoba. Hate to say it, but I was fishing northerns. Sorry. But we went into a bay right out in front of the resort, pretty heavily fished. And we had 2 boats literally ahead of us. And this structure, which I'm going to explain in a little bit more about what a structure is, but this structure had a lily pad bed, a rush bed, 2 foot of water, 4 foot of water, a rock wall dropped into 8 foot of water. Everybody was going in. They were throwing lures and bucktails up into the weeds, okay? And they left. We came in and we did the same thing. We throw a spinner bait into the lily pad, bounce it around. We throw a weedless Johnson spoon into the bulrushes, pull it around. But then there's this parallel to the bank. There's this 8 foot drop. Nobody touched it. We tied on a couple of crankbaits, shad wraps, extreme shad wraps. Second cast got a 10-pound northern. There'd been 4 boats during the morning already go over the top of that fish, and nobody ever put a lure on it. That's an example. There's only 1 fish, but that's better than no fish, and we were already there. Okay, it makes sense. I was going to say too about structures. Structures are not limited. For those of you that like to drift, like to bump, use your trolling motor to move it around slow. They're not limited in size or content. You can have a structure realistically that's a mile long. Maybe you have a half a mile of riprap, part of it's connected to the bank, there's a log jam up on the other end. That half a mile is a structure. The log jam is simply an element, the riprap is an element, the channel is an element. They're connected. If they're connected, it's a structure. And the same fish can use it. You have fish that are holding, well, it's like flathead, okay? You got three types of structures that a flathead as a species uses. You have a nursery, which is little value to you at all. It's simply like the riprap of the rocks that are put together tight enough so the little fish can get in, but the big fish can't get in to eat them. Okay, that's a nursery. Doesn't do you a lot of good to fish. Then there's a staging structure. Okay, the staging structure is going to be the most common structure that people fish. For me, it's a log jam in a small river. Staging structure is where the flatheads will sit throughout the day. Okay? Depth really does not matter with these fish at all. It just doesn't. If it's a proper element, they will hang to it. And with government tagging and checking up in South Dakota on the Jim and the Sioux River, the fish over 10 pounds preferred like 80% and above a wood element. So log jams are a good bet for the flatheads. But when it comes down to night, sun's going down, now you're looking at a feeding platform. What's a feeding platform? Flatheads, as a species, prefer to feed in under 9 feet of water. It makes sense if you look at the fish. He has an undercut. He likes to strike up. He wants to strike up. He does not want to come straight at it, and he has a very hard time going down on it. 9 foot of water has a reason. Over the generations and centuries, they can catch fish that are 2 feet above their head. They can't catch them when they're 20 feet above their head. So the fish that survived learned to feed in shallow water. Most people look for, we'll just say like the dam, the deepest hole, throw your bait out in it. That's where the fish is. With a flathead, he could be sitting right under your feet. Okay? If you're talking deal period, which I'm a little off the subject, but I'm going to stay there. On a flathead, the deal period is a 24-hour period, okay? I'm going to do a full seminar on flatheads tomorrow at 9 o'clock. Right now I'm just throwing some stuff at you. But the deal period is a 24-hour feeding period, okay? Tagged fish, checked, tagged, and followed. At sunset, they were in a log jam. And this is like 20, 25 fish they're tagging with radio telemetry, okay? They were feeding. They were sitting here. At dark, they move out of that log jam. I'm going to hit you with a scenario now and tell you where they went. Any of you fish log jams at night? You pull up at 8 o'clock at night, park your butt on a bucket. Yeah, I like this. I like doing it. I get there before dark because I like seeing what I'm doing. Don't want to fall in the river. And at 8 o'clock, you get a bite, right? The sun's just starting to come off the water, and you get a bite. This is great. We're going to knock him dead, right? You missed him, but that's okay. Yeah, you have. Anyway, 9 o'clock, you get another bite, and you get him. He's a 10-pound fish. Wonderful. We're going to knock him dead, and the bites continue till midnight, right? You catch a few, you miss a few. At midnight, everything stops. Oh, gosh, I thought we were going to knock him dead. If you have a buddy like mine, his name's Jason, he's on the phone calling people downriver about 5 miles. He's going, God, what's happening? We were doing really good, and they quit biting. The guy's down there, yeah, we had 4, lost 2, missed 2, and now they just quit. They quit biting. Well, then the conversation goes, they'll start biting again at sunrise. You guys done it? Yeah, you've done that too. They'll start biting again at sunrise. Well, I hate to break it to you, they didn't quit biting. They moved. They went from the staging structure to the feeding platform. Okay? They may have a roundabout way to get there, going up a shoreline. They're going to be in shallow water. This is why set liners lib liners, set their live baits right next to the banks at night. These flatheads move the banks. It's kind of like a cow in the pasture following a fence line. Okay? And if they're that big, yeah, good luck. Anyway, so they move. How far they move depends on the body of water, depends on where the feeding platform is. They can move up to 1 mile in the night. Okay? So you can use this as an angler. You say you got private property problems where there's this really beautiful set of logs down here and you can't get to them because you can't go across the fence. If you've got a feeding platform up above it, you can intercept those fish after dark. Okay? Now, believe it or not, when they were tracking these fish, this is what happened. They tracked them right up into the feeding platforms, which can be a ripple, a riffle hole run type thing. It can be just a flat with some little scattered brush. It can be just simply a bank or a rock wall where they can pin the bait fish up against it. That's where they're feeding. Now, why do they start biting again at sunrise? Well, when the sun starts coming up, those fish make a circle. They've tracked them. They will come back to that same log jam. That's why when at 6 in the morning you're getting bites again on the same log jam. They're coming right back into where they left. And when they tracked these fish, they found that they were returning most of them to within 3 feet. 3 feet of where they left the night before. This is what, like radar. They're on top of these fish within 3 feet of where they were sitting when they left at sunrise. So if you're sitting there in the morning, yeah, you're going to get a couple more bites. It makes sense, right? Okay, time to move on. I got a little carried away, but I like it. Okay, high percentage elements. I never even got there. High percentage elements. To be a high percentage element, and this is what you want. This is what makes you successful. A high percentage element has to have a couple of things. Okay, number one, it has to be attractive to the species you're looking for. Okay, if the fish don't want rocks on the body of water, you're fishing rocks doesn't do you any good. This element must also have its own capability to concentrate and hold fish, which would be size, okay, and content. It must also have a relationship or connection to that second high-powered element. Is making sense to everybody how this works? This is just, like I say, it's common sense on steroids, but people just don't talk about it this way. If you find structures like that and you put them together, you only need 4 structures. For me, I only need 4 structures a day, okay? Because of the time elements and the species, time of day, that type of thing. I'll go through in the morning and check my 4 structures because I know there's going to be fish on them someplace. Are they going to be biting? I don't know. I'll come back at noon. I'll run those same 4 elements or those 4 structures again if I have time, unless I start catching fish. If I don't got them in, I'm going to come back and do the same 4 structures that afternoon or that evening because they're the best places in that body of water, and when those fish move, they're going to be there one way or the other. Or they're going to come out from under the elements and start feeding. If you leave those structures, what are you going to go fish? A lesser structure? I mean, go fish a plain piece of water instead of your 4 structures. That wouldn't make sense at all. But time during the day can make a difference. You're going to want to check those out. Okay, we already talked about the 66%. The 3 common elements here. We have the log jam. Right off of this is a river channel, okay? And then, of course, the bank. But you need to look at what's in front of you when you're fishing. You need to look at the structure. What does it really offer? This looks pretty simple. This is just a stupid little log jam on a stupid little river. But if you look at this, it's showing you something. Actually, it's showing you several things. And I'm going to point them out. To start with, at the bank, we've got like a debris float right here up against the bank. There's no current. that's going to be full of junk. And there's not going to be any washouts. The slope of the bank, the lack of current, there's not going to be any undercuts on that log jam, not on that bank. There's a very slight current out here. This log overhangs the channel. That's so-so. You know, you got a little current out on the end, fish might come around. But right here, you've got a break in that tree. You've got an area where there's current going through a break. This is like it's like a dam with a break in it, okay? You've got two separate elements then, one on each side. You've got your bank, you've got the break, you've got your channel, you've got some overhead cover. When the fish come off of this, I doubt they're going to come up here just because of the debris. They're going to come through this channel. Most people would pull up and they'd fish this right here. That's fine, but you're going to connect with 4 fish. Back to the cattle thing, right? In the pasture, they're funneled down right here. They're going to come through here, and you're going to be able to get your bait in front of it a lot easier than out here where they can swim by you and never even find you. I'm not saying don't put a bait out there, but put one here. And this is where it comes down to putting your bait in 3 places, checking not only 3 elements, but the 3 positions on a structure. This is kind of the theory of 3 that's going on. You want to make sure you check it. If I just put a bait out here and left again, I'm walking away from a large percent of the bite possibilities. That's wasting my time. This isn't much of a structure, don't get me wrong, but if I was going to fish it, it would deserve a half hour and a couple of spots, you know? Okay, you need to present to all 3. This is an example when I was talking about how structures are not limited in size. This looks like the whole darn body of water, but it's not. This is a structure on one side of the shore. You've got your rock island. This is on the Missouri River. You got a channel cutting across here, and you've got a rock point that's coming out and sloping. You have a shallow feeding platform between the island and the point. You have a channel out here. You have rocks for cover. Okay, if you don't fish those rocks, and you don't fish that flat spot, and you don't fish with the channel butts up against that point, again, you walked away from your potential bites, and you're already there. Now, like I said, if you find what the fish are sitting on, then don't waste your time. If you know they're on rocks, focus on rocks. You know they're on wood, focus on wood. If they're hiding on the ledges, the channel drops, focus on the channel drops. But still try to put 3 elements together, okay? I'm not going to talk a lot about rods, reels, line, hooks, bait, because I have one belief in all of that. I've never used a hook that wouldn't catch a fish. I've never used line that didn't work, some better than others, but they work. Some people like to fish with spinning rods. Some people like to fish with bait casters. It's important that you fish with what you like because you will fish better. If you don't like your equipment, you're not paying attention to it. Now, that doesn't mean you don't need to make sure your line is heavy enough, your hooks are big enough, that type of thing. You do. You need to have that under lock and key, but the type you use is up to you, you know? They'll all catch fish if they're put in front of them. Fishing is numbers. It is a numbers game, and people don't look at it that way. You should. Focus on presentation, not catching fish. Because if you cannot put your hook, bait, or lure in front of the fish, you not only will not get bit, you cannot get bit. That's just a fact, okay? And there are certain things you cannot control. Little items. Sometimes during a day, it's possible that 1 out of 10 fish will take your offering, maybe, okay? Well, if that's the case, then you have an opportunity, if you present to 10 fish, possibly hook one. If you present to 20 fish, you have the possibility to catch two. 100 fish, you have the possibility to catch three. The presentation is more important if you're doing your homework. You're already using a bait that you know works on that body of water. You're already using equipment you like. You've already chosen the body of water. What's left? You have to put it in front of the fish. Finding the fish and presenting to the fish catches the fish. Without that step, you're losing everything. You just are. It doesn't work. Okay. Focus on presenting the fish. Worry less about catching fish. All right. I'm going to go through a couple things here on species real quick, just for some thought patterns for you. Channel cat, that's my daughter Yori, by the way. She's a better fisherman than I am. In fact, I'm going to tell you just a quick story about this. This area she's fishing, we took the picture this way so that nobody in our home area could tell where she was. But she found that structure by herself on that body of water. Of course, she's been fishing with me for 20 years already. But when I asked her about it, because I was filming, we did this for a video we have coming out on Amazon next summer, but I asked her about it and said, why did you pick this area? And this kind of sums it all up. She said, well, when we pulled up, Dad, I was looking across the water here, and this side is just really kind of calm and quiet. There's not much going on. I looked across over here, she said, well, we got some rocks on the shore over here. We got a spring that comes in off this bank. We've got an old channel where when they dammed this up, the old channel was running down that bank. And she says, I can see fish feeding along those rocks. So there's more going on over there. And that's absolutely it. It comes back to but it comes right back to the elements. There's a channel, there's a small stream, or not stream, but a spring. There's some rock, channel, the whole bit. Okay, and there was fish feeding. She just looked at it, there's more going on. So I'm going to fish there. Now, this day she caught this channel cat using cut bait. Just to tell you how you do it per species. We kind of set this up to make this happen. I'm going to be honest about it. We did. We're fishing channel cats today. We came back the next day fishing northern. So instead of cut bait, we're using a spinner bait. She caught a 12-pound northern. We came back the day after, and we were using crappie rigs with a minnow, and she caught a 28-inch walleye off the same structure. So this is how you adjust the structures to fit the fish you want. By elements. Now the fish in this body of water don't have a choice. They had to be here. I'm just being honest with you, they did. There's not a lot of places for them to go. Okay? But by picking the presentation for the fish, which again is common sense, you can dictate which ones you're going to come into. You wouldn't fish muskie with a leech on a crappie, under a crappie bobber, you know. You wouldn't fish a crappie with a 10-inch plastic muskie bait. There you go. But the elements were favorable to all species in that body of water. She targeted them and she caught them. So if you're looking for flatheads, channels, blues, you need to look at the body of water and what does that species look for. Not what you want, not what you think, but what does that species look for. Then you pick the bait, okay, and you pick the presentation and you go for it. To the channels, these are just obvious main current seams. Remember, this is what you have to pay attention to what you're looking at. Why is there a current seam? What makes a current seam? There's something going on under there. There's a channel, there's a rock, there's a depth change, there's trash, there's something that makes a current seam. A current seam is not just an innocent nothing. It shows you there's something else going on. Windy points, focus on the incoming side, obviously the wind again. But if the wind, what has the wind been doing for the last 3 days? Not necessarily what it has been doing today. The channels, current seams, blow downs, riffles, current breaks, depending if you're in the lakes, weed lines, main lake humps. Again, three structures or three elements put together. That's what builds your structure. That's what will find you the fish. Flatheads. I already told you most of this when I got off. Oh, went wrong way. Oh, sorry. This is still more about the channels. Some info that, now this isn't my info, by the way. This came from some game fish and parks research, so I have to be transparent about that. Obviously, you know, they're more active at night during all four seasons. They move the greatest distances simply in the fall when the weather starts chilling down the water a little bit. I thought these were interesting though. During the day, they were tracking channel cats. During the day, the channel cats were definitely holding tighter to the banks than they were the main channel or the main current flow. Now that's just the opposite of what most people think. You know, have you ever noticed you go up to the shore fishing and the guys on shore are trying to cast halfway across the river and the guys in the boat are fishing against the bank? Yeah, well, during the day, they're sitting near the bank. At night, they move out to the channels to hunt, okay, to move up, and they go on their prowl. During the day, they're being a little quieter. Also, in the spring and fall, where it's available, the channels prefer riprap. Again, I would have to think this would have to do with, in the spring, possibly spawning, possibly forage, not real sure. In the winter, the channels were looking for sandy areas. This is on a river. I have to believe that's probably because of the current. Usually, like on the Missouri River below Yankton, you know, it's sandy for about 15 miles down, then it starts turning to mud. It's got to be something to do with current in the winter. Clay banks in the warmer months. I'm not real sure why, but that's where all the tag fish were hanging out. They were going to the clay banks and clay shores. Sorry. Okay, we went through the staging areas. I'm going to throw this in, then I'm going to ask Tim to come up in a minute. Yep, come on up if you want. I'll go through the northern. This isn't a northern seminar, but the muskies and northerns, we're all on the same pattern, and it's the same thing. I'm not going to go into great detail unless anybody's an avid muskie or northern fisherman here. Probably not. So we'll pass on that. I'm going to be transparent here. I am not a master blue cat angler. I'm not going to pretend to be, so I'm not going to sit here and talk to you like I am. That would be, well, dishonest, frankly. So I'm going to invite Tim up here. He is a blue cat angler. We're just going to ask a couple questions back and forth so he can answer them. He knows more about blues than I do, so that's going to benefit you.
So Ted, very good, very good. What a master class in understanding pretty much how those things go together. I really enjoyed that. So what do you want to know about blues?
Well, let's start out with, what's your favorite bait for blue cats? Cut bait? And if so, what?
Yes.
What
For the most part, I'd say probably 90% of the time, I would be opting for cut bait.
Okay.
Now, there are times, although it's slim, when the cut bait does not perform well, and I move to live bait, especially softer ray, big shad, moon eye, things like that. But generally speaking, I will tend to mostly use a carp, a sucker, and I mean, for doing what I do, big pieces. I mean, giant 5-pound carp heads and all that crazy stuff.
Okay.
But as a general rule, moon eye on the Mississippi throughout this entire Missouri / lower Mississippi area performs really well.
Okay. Next question.
And they will show preference, just like you said. They will show preference at times on particular baits that they happen to key on. Why exactly? We have no idea, but they do it. And we know it.
Okay. Now, We did not practice this, so I hope I don't trap you. I've been talking elements. I'm gonna change the picture here. I've been talking about elements. To you, what elements are blue caps looking for?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
So a general average run-of-the-mill bluegill, is that it? Okay, all right. We're old, Kevin. We don't understand this technology stuff. So the elements that a person would look for the general run-of-the-mill blue cats is, first you got to be in blue cat territory, and then you're going to be looking for, and I put current first on the list, because the other two are very structure cover oriented, and it doesn't seem, and as much as I have focused on cover such as bridge abutments and sunken wood and big rocks and all that stuff, it didn't really pay off in big blue cat location. Now it can, because it's going to coincide with the correct current sometimes. So you could have a tree in 35 foot of water and there's big blue cats around it. Fine, but take that tree and put it into Flathead water, which is 15 to 20, 25 foot of water of gentle flow, and you don't find any blues. They'll go up there occasionally, especially at night, sometimes in the evening, things like that, but that's not a constant that I can count on. I could count on one hand how many blues over 60 pounds I've caught in the stretch that I fish in less than 25 foot of water. Now, is it because I mostly focus on 25 foot of water? Probably, but when I first started it, I used my channel cat and flathead mentality to try to catch giant blues. It did not work very well. So I'm looking for probably current first, but I would have to say depth first, adequate depth that will hold blues. But then I'm looking for blue cat style current. That means for me, somewhere between 2.5 all the way up to 9 to 12 mile an hour of current. And really, I haven't found any current on the Mississippi that a big blue cat is not willing to go into and actually even hold. I mean, a lot of times they prefer a little bit less current to hold. They'll hold suspending and not really be active, or they'll be laying directly on the bottom. But without the current, if you take the current away out of that whole equation, the blue cats, if they have no choice, they could still be there, but you're not going to be very successful with them. Because I think everybody knows, but you take a current level that's up here and you drop it like a rock, and blue cats are like, we're not doing it. So the one thing that I don't mention much in locating giant blue cats is bait fish. And if you hear, find the bait, find the fish. There's all kinds of bait fish along banks. There's all kinds of bait fish in places that I would not find, or I would not spend time trying to catch big blue cats. Now, if I'm going to want to catch average run of the mills, 5 to 25, 30 pounds, then the equation is a lot looser. You can go to 15 foot. You can go to places. Maybe you go to where a tributary is coming in, and maybe they're hanging out behind a wing dike in the slower water. They'll come farther up. But for most of the really big stuff, I really need to stay 25 to even as deep as 50, 60. But once I start going into 70, 80, 90, then it's on again, off again. One day they were there, the next day they're not. Or they were there for the fall period, they were there for the winter period, and as soon as spring happens, they're gone. I like to focus on spots that are good year round. Spring, summer, winter, fall. And that goes with blues, it goes with flatheads, not necessarily channel cats.
Perfect. Anybody take one question for Tim if somebody's got one? No?
Well, as luck would have it, I'll be speaking next. So if you got any questions, or I'll maybe fire up some questions with you.
Yeah, I got one. You're catching, say, 15, 20 pounds fish. Would big fish be around those?
As a general rule, I do not usually catch overly huge blues with an abundance of small fish. Now, they're not like flatheads. The blues are pretty accepting of each other, and we know this because out of all the blues that you catch, there's very few bite marks on them. You'll get your occasional, it looks like a nip happened here and a nip happened there, they're kind of close. But they don't seem to chase each other out or around. So it's not, I've caught 100-pounders at the same time I've caught 20 or in the same general area. Now, there are areas that hold numbers of smaller fish, but never or hardly ever hold a giant. That's one thing. And it's not because the fish are pushing each other in or out. They're not necessarily fighting. It just happens to be that it's like Ted says, the elements are right. You've got the proper depth, the acceptable depth for time of year. You've got, as far as bait fish location, on a lake, I believe that. You got to find you want to be amidst the bait. You got bait balls, you got marks underneath them. I mean, I've been to many lakes, and that seems to be the case. But on the Mississippi, bait fish so happen to intersect with their preferred habitat. If you get what I mean. They're not going to change out of their habitat that they're comfortable in and have to go chase bait up in carp and gar water.
On that last note, Tim actually comes back up in about 5 minutes. So we're going to thank Ted for his presentation. Everybody give a round of applause. Sir, Ted would be more than willing to answer any questions you have if you didn't get to ask. We didn't want to cut him off in the middle of his speech. But after the Catfish Tim will be up in about 5 minutes. We'll let him get prepared for his. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.